Steve, I want to ask you, just just to rewind the clock. When did you? I know you obviously you grew up in this amazing your dad musical family. When did you start playing piano? Everyone out there, when did you start studying the piano?
Yeah, I started really early. I started like I took my first lessons at 4, but don't be impressed by that at all. I was a horrible student. Always was a terrible student. As soon as it got difficult, as soon as it got hard, I would be distracted. I'm realizing now in my adult life that I think all my life I dealt with a lot of attention deficit issues. And the thing was is that I just never gave up. Um, my dad was also a known drum teacher. He was really good. He's written books.
Oh yeah,
He didn't just teach guys. He actually had a curriculum, and that's what he did when we were young kids for a living before we moved to LA at all. So a lot of his friends in the studio, I mean, a lot of them would know that my dad taught, and they'd ask him to give their kids lessons. And whenever it was a piano player, and I'm talking about Claire Fisher, Pete Robinson, Charlie
right.
Shoemake, I could go on. Victor Feldman.
Oh yeah.
I could go on and on with the friends of his that he bartered with, and he'd ask me, "Do you want to start? Do you want to take lessons from this guy? I'm going to teach his kid." And I always would go, "Sure."
I love that.
I'd always go, "Sure,"
Love it.
and I'd start again. I never gave up.
Michael Jackson's Thriller album.
Stories in the Room.
This is Michael Jackson's Thriller album, Stories in the Room. Join film composer Anthony Marinelli, who programmed synthesizers for 7 songs on Thriller, and A&R veteran film producer Stephen Ray, who assisted Quincy Jones and was in the studio every day with Quincy and Michael.
Michael Jackson's Thriller album, Stories in the Room.
So I worked. Pete Robinson was another great studio musician in the film world with my dad, who I took from Pete probably for the longest amount of time, and I was getting very serious then. He goes by Peter Manning Robinson now.
Right.
Still around, still making incredible music. But I would take lessons from these guys, and I never gave up. I would keep trying, you know what I mean? But as it got towards the end of high school and I saw my brother's careers take off right away, I was scared to death. I was looking around, and the competition was David Paich and David Foster and Michael Omartian and all these incredible guys that I was nowhere near their level of keyboard prowess. And that was why that's one of the reasons I really saw this gap, though, as far as the synths went. I saw that, sure, there was Chick and Herbie and these guys that had both going on, that were really good with and could play, but there were a lot of guys out there that were amazing, but they would never bother making these black boxes or dealing with interfacing this stuff, or they would go so far, you know what I mean? But then they didn't want to deal with synths, and I just jumped in there. You know what I mean?
Right.
I jumped in there, and I was non-threatening, and I got to work on a lot of cool stuff.
That's amazing. Yeah. Like some of those guys, like I actually took a drum lesson from your dad over at Dick Grove and Rich Lepore. There were like all of his friends, and I used to hang out with those guys. But some of the guys you mentioned, like Claire Fisher, they wanted to know what you were doing in synthesizers, and I was giving them 2600 lessons in exchange for chord voicings and stuff like that. Terry Trotter, they had to play like it. They had to play in the pit, like for Broadway shows and stuff like that.
Right.
They were Terry was?
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, he's a really good friend.
Talk Microcosmos, you know what I mean?
Right.
Had to go through that. And always Bach and the D flat major scale. That was the one that he would really harp on. But yeah, it was a little bit different track. But I guess there was a lot more of that going on because I don't see that happening now, where people are young musicians all bartering and trying to like learn what the other people are doing. And one thing your dad always said was like, always be friends with drummers. And he would say, you're a keyboard player, you should be friends, because you shouldn't be competing for gigs with your own. He really believed in that. But these are like all these like great philosophical things that were embedded in me from that generation. And, it's good that people hear it now. Maybe they'll start doing it because there's a lot to learn from others instead of just being like hauled up in your own little studio in front of a laptop.
Sure.
Right.
No, always, starting in 5th grade, I loved working with other keyboard players, especially other keyboard players that were better than me. This is why
me
David
too.
And look at even like going in to do Thriller. Quincy was hiring me, on my own as a synth player, but I started bringing David with me. You know what I mean? So that no matter what was needed, we had it covered. If all of a sudden they needed a jazz thing, Paige and I would play tag team. You know what I mean? Like
tag team. That's what we did a lot of stuff after Thriller with Greg Fillinganes, and he called it tag team. Yeah, I mean, but you watch these guys. I mean, it was such a learning experience. I looked at it that way. It's like you learn so much faster that way.
Yeah. Well, you had such a feel, though, Steve. I know you're. I'm not going to allow you to downplay your playing.
Yeah.
You had a real feel to that others did not have.
Join us for the next episode of Michael Jackson's Thriller album, Stories in the Room, with your hosts Anthony Marinelli and Stephen Ray. Watch our extended interviews on youtube.com/@StoriesInTheRoom. Audio-only interviews are available on all podcast networks. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok @StoriesInTheRoom. For the latest news and links, visit the website, StoriesInTheRoom.com. This podcast is produced by Christian D. Bruun and David Wolf, recorded by Audivita Studios. Additional recording by Ben Rackless. Edited by Jay Spang and Sean Hedinger. Music by Anthony Marinelli and Stephen Ray.
Michael Jackson's Thriller album.
Stories